let's go then. So, Graham, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm absolutely delighted that you've agreed to join me on It's Not So Lonely at the Top podcast. I'm really, really delighted that you're here. And for the listeners, Graham and I met probably nearly a year ago now, I reckon. And we've been chatting for some time. And Graham is the, what's the right terminology for Molecey? You're the Custodian, yeah. Okay, cool. The custodian of Molecey Mill, which is where we host the mastermind, and it's just the most magical, wonderful place. So I guess the first thing for me is to say thank you for creating such an amazing space. I love the energy there. I love coming. I love bringing people, and their faces. It's like their inner child comes out, and they just are wowed by the location. So, but I guess the first thing is for you to just introduce yourself. Who is Graham? I know how to spell your surname, but what's the correct pronunciation for a start? Yeah. Just if you can, just introduce yourself for the audience.
Good morning, Pete. Thanks very much for having me. It was interesting this morning when I set off, because I suddenly realised I'd probably never seen a podcast and never been part of a podcast. So it was my podcast virginity today, which is actually a very exciting thing, isn't it? And I suppose when I walked into the studio, was overwhelmed yet again by how much you throw into things. And I think you've been very kind to me just now, but actually people meet other people and are excited by people. And I think that's what's really important. And as humans, I think that's what we get out of it, isn't it? Is sharing, is caring, is actually being together. And when you meet somebody who's dynamic, exciting, and has a lot to give, I think you attach yourself very quickly, don't you, really? And Molecey gives the opportunity for that. I think we've had lots of people get very excited about it. Of course, when we first viewed it 10 years ago, it wasn't the place it is today, but it still had all that potential. And that we talk about the water. Glenn, my partner, will always talk about the rivers, streams, and everything through it. But yeah, we're just custodians of something, aren't we? We're part of a local environment, part of a local picture, part of a local story. But yes, if you can't spell my surname, it's Magee. Sorry, it's Irish, I think. I haven't done the family history on me particularly, but yes, yeah.
So Graham Magee.
So famine, refugees, I think possibly coming over to Birmingham. Dad's family were Birmingham industrialists. Dad's a Brummie. So yes, so they settled in the Midlands really and made things with their hands. I think I wouldn't do Dad a disservice to say he's a hard, fast engineer really. If you can hit something with a big hammer.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And we grew up with all of that around us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So did you grow up in Birmingham?
Just north, so Lichfield. So it's a three-spired cathedral, birthplace of Dr. Johnson, who wrote the dictionary. David Garrick was born there. Sure. Elias Ashmole, who set up the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. So luminary Georgian society, really, I think. And it still thrives a little bit on that. It does see itself as a bit fancy. And I have a Lichfield accent, so I don't speak like a Brummie. Like Dad would say, "You're right, Agray, shut the garage doors." But I don't. And Dr. Johnson would say, "I speak with a Lichfield accent." Okay. So it has, you will pick up intonations of vowels and bits and bobs that drop out. And I will affect myself to say glass and bath with the right people, but generally it'd be grass and bath.
Love it. And it's quite funny actually, because for some reason my son, who has grown up in Peterborough, occasionally puts on a Brummie accent, which we were like, where do you get that from? It's so random.
When I was at university, it got voted the worst accent in the world after South African. Also, it was quite harsh, yeah. And they'd only met their mum and dad a couple of times. I mean, it wasn't very fair on my housemates.
as a staunch Manchester United fan, I've got to say the Scouse accent's the worst one. But anyway, let's not get into that, because
it's like politics.
That then leads us. To be fair, I'm knocking the microphone now. I'm going to get into trouble. But that leads me on to education-wise, because you moved to Liverpool after your education. We were talking about that before we came on air. So you grew up in Lichfield. You then went to Cambridge to study.
Yeah, I went.
And what did you study?
I studied law. I went a little bit late. I went as what they called a mature student in the early 90s. But I just left a couple of years later. Dad was building a new factory and I was helping him do that. So we finished that, and then I went to university a bit later, so probably 1991 or something like that. Okay. And then read law, and then luckily was able to add a few extra modules into it. So I started to just sort of broaden it a little bit, but was always fascinated by the stories. I think storytelling, if anybody that knows me will know today at Molecey, storytelling is a big part of what I do. Really.
Sure.
I like history, but I like telling a story. And I think law was great, was one of my first tastes of that, really.
Sure.
Case law is brilliant at that. The anecdotal, the human stories, the people's, that's huge.
It's really interesting you saying that, actually, because I'm just drawing a bit of experience on. I did my TED talk the other week, which was really exciting and amazing. But actually, it was at Nottingham Trent Uni, and one of the chaps who was speaking was a historian, and his talk was around justices of the peace and the history behind the role of justice of the peace. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but they're essentially now magistrates.
Yeah.
And he shared all the history behind it and these people, and they were landowners, and it was just
so important people.
Yeah. Fascinating bit of history, actually. So yeah, interesting TED talk. When that one goes live, probably worth listening to him. He's very knowledgeable and about that sort of stuff. But anyway, let's carry on with Graham. Right, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easily. So, so you study at Cambridge, and then you said you went and had some party times in Liverpool, right?
Yes. Well, then I graduated from Cambridge and then moved up to the northwest to start my legal practice course. So I went to Chester, do the legal practice course, and of course Liverpool in the mid-90s was just a really exciting, dynamic place. Cream was open. Lots of Liverpool was still semi-derelict, Seal Street, places like that. And there hadn't been all the regeneration that there is today, but it was just an exciting, fun, and it's a very student city. It's a very on the edge of the world in some respects. I still feel my time in Liverpool felt like you're on the cusp of something else. And I think the heritage of docks and shipping and travel and transport was still massive in Liverpool.
Sure.
So yeah, I love that being on the edge of the world kind of feel.
Love that.
Yeah. I sailed out. I was determined to do it. I wanted to leave Pier Head and sail. So we actually just got a ferry to Dublin. But it was lovely to leave Liverpool. So many tens of thousands of people had arrived and left from Liverpool, going on to the new world, going on to new lives.
Of course. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And that then brought you back to Cambridge. And I guess the reason I'm interested to speak to you about Cambridge is because that's where I grew up. So it's kind of like home to me. I grew up just outside Cambridge, between St Ives and Cambridge, in a little village called Over, where my parents still live, and they still live in the same house that I grew up in. And my dad was he was a policeman for 30 years, so I always had that stigma growing up, which was a bit tricky.
Bobby's son.
Yeah, the local Bobby's son. Exactly that. Very strict, I must say. But interestingly, obviously we were talking off air beforehand, and you mentioned that you lived in Cherry Hinton. Now, one of the things that I did back in the day when I was a wee lad, I worked for Green King Pubco, and I did their management training course, and I actually was an assistant manager at the Rock. I don't know if you ever come across the Rock pub, which was on Cherry Hinton Road.
Yes.
And I used to live there, and I remember my room would overlook Cherry Hinton Road, which is actually, it's quite a busy road in Cambridge, sort of up and down. So tell me about your time. So you went to Liverpool, and you sort of carried on studying there from a practice perspective. What was the pull back to Cambridge? And I think Cherry Hinton.
I'd stopped the law course. I kind of decided it wasn't actually going to be for me, and I got volunteer. I volunteered initially with an environmental charity called Groundwork. They were fairly new at the time. They were set up in St Helens, and they were about regeneration. They were about engaging local people in their environment. It was very much that early phase of the environmental movement, even in Britain, I think, a bit, and how people could get involved in it. So we'd do community woodlands, gardens for community centres, all sorts of projects like that. And Groundwork was quite a big charity and grew quite rapidly. There was lots of funding, I think, for that sort of thing at the time. But it was an exciting place to be. I mean, I went out planting trees with school kids, and they were third generation unemployed. Even in the late 90s, people's grandfather hadn't worked, father didn't work, they weren't going to work. So it was just nice to kind of take people outside and find out what a worm was. Try and plant a tree the right way up. I mean, if you've ever had 30 school kids with tiny trees and they plant them with the roots in the air, because it looks like a tree when you stick it in the ground. So I spent 2 years sort of doing that. And then
people think Cambridge is posh, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, that was in Liverpool, but yeah. Oh, right, and then I left. Right. Then I left Liverpool for posh people who understood which way around to plant.
Oh, really? Right.
So yeah,
okay.
I did. Right. I moved on to Cambridge. Then after that, got a better job for Cambridge City Council in the planning department,
Yes.
doing environmental work there. So, but it was much more thought through, really.
Sure.
It was much more of the mind, really.
Sure. And is the environment still something that you care about? Is that still?
I love being outside. I love the outdoors. If I could be outdoors all the time, I probably would be, really. Yes, I do. And Molecey gives us that great opportunity. We've got a 20-acre back garden, and actually it's full of birds and wildlife. And, I think that's fantastic. That's what makes it exciting. But yes, I do enjoy being outside a lot, and would like to do that much more.
I think I feel very much a kindred spirit in that sense. I live sadly in a little sort of township called Hampton in Peterborough, which is very suburban, I suppose. And part of me craves the country. I grew up, like I say, in this village called Over, which is really on the brink of the fens. And I was very fortunate because it was such a safe area that I was feral. I was able to just sort of roam everywhere, and I'd go down to the river. There was a river called Overcote which would run through, and I'd go across on the fens, and there were woods and orchards, and I sort of grew up sort of in and around all of that. And actually, when I came to visit you at Molecey for probably the second time I think I came, I met Ian and Cleo, and I don't know if you remember, but it was midsummer, lovely day. We were just sat outside by the greenhouse and having coffee, and it just felt like I was on holiday and just soaking up the atmosphere. And I was like, definitely got to have that mastermind here. It's just what an incredible place it is.
And nature makes that a really important part of our lives, doesn't it? I think the natural world, whatever it might be, if it's trees, if it's birds and animals, whatever. But I think it's such an important, and if you absorb it, as you say you did, and just take time to listen, I think we forget in a busy world to just sort of step back and watch. I mean, we've got a kingfisher. Well, we've got several kingfishers, but more people see him now than I think did see him. Because actually, I say to people, have you seen the kingfisher? People just stop and look. And I think taking time to look just makes a difference. And it calms you, it rests you, it reduces stress and anxiety, doesn't it? Just to take time out, I think. But I think I learned some of that in Cambridge. I think for me, the special thing about Cambridge was the freedom on a bike.
Yes.
Big skies. We'd cycle for miles and miles, a bit like you would have done as a boy running around, kind of in a sense. But cycling was such a big part of Cambridge life. And going out of Cambridge, somebody would say, "Oh, we'll go out to Wycombe Fen for," I probably wouldn't do it now, but it was quite a jaunt.
Yeah.
Let's go for a drink in Ely on your bike. Well, yeah, we did. And actually, Cambridge has got better at cycle routes. There's better cycle routes coming out of Cambridge now, so you can do that without traffic. But traffic got out of the way of bikes when I was in Cambridge. It wasn't the other way around, and it's quite unusual to feel like you're in charge of the road as a.
It is an unusual thing. It is one of the beautiful things about Cambridge. Actually, you are right in the pedestrian. It is a city that's owned by the pedestrians and cyclists.
It is, and that's refreshing, and that makes you sort of feel engaged, doesn't it? Whether it's the architecture or the backs or parts of Cambridge, the commons, the greens and things around Cambridge. It's such a green city.
I'd never really reflected on it, but they really did in the 90s. They really set their stall out, didn't they, by setting up the park and rides outside of the town.
Yeah.
And saying if you're coming into town, you need to get the bus.
Yeah, and it was quite ahead of its game. That sort of planning decisions were quite ahead of the game. Yeah. And then even the guided busway. I mean,
the misguided bus.
The misguided bus. Yeah.
look at me speaking like, there's going to be people watching this. There's going to be people watching this. What on earth are they talking about?
No, it is quite surreal. It is quite a strange. But again, you can still cycle out to St. Art. You can still use it as a pedestrian or as a bike user.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes.
And I remember my parents actually back in the day. I remember them being a bit like, obviously it was a huge investment, the guided bus, and it went through Swavesey on the way to St. Ives. So my parents were right on top of it. So Swavesey, and then you got over, and actually it's been my dad. My dad sadly had a stroke. He probably won't. I'm sure he won't mind me saying he had a stroke a few years ago, and he, because of his eyesight, was then not able to drive. And actually, it's been a real lifesaver for him to be able to use that. So
use the bus and get into Cambridge. And actually, I think that was such an innovative thing, wasn't it? It was such quite an unusual thing, but actually, it was very typical of Cambridge. I think you look at the sort of Silicon Fen story and Cambridge becoming a driver for growth, and actually, Cambridge has been full of energy from the early 70s. Really, once the university set up the science park to breed, micro business, but to actually take people out of university and to set them on a career path, and to give that facility. But Cambridge became, I think when I left it still felt like a Fenland market town with an international university attached to it. Yeah. I think it now feels like an inland international university with a squashed town attached to it a little bit. So I think it was very much the other way around. Town and Gown, I think town was probably stronger it felt like it when I was there. Whereas Gown's definitely taken over. But that, that's huge for the sub-region. It even affects Peterborough. It spreads out much further. So as a driver, from your youth, from my growing up there, I suppose, as a student, Cambridge has had a huge power to the local area, really.
Yeah.
And we probably don't give it the credit it's due. I mean, I look at Cambridge now and I feel a bit sorry for it, really. I think the expansion of Cambridge, but it's all going to be good. It's all about the future for the east of England, and that's what we're part of, isn't it? Really.
Sure. I think the shame for me, I suppose, when I look at it from a selfish level, was that I had to move out to be able to build my life and grow my family, because it was just unattainable.
Yeah.
To be able to live.
And that was part of the planning department when I was there. The restriction of the Greenbelt meant there was no development at all, and Cambridge was still controlled by its sort of 1950s Greenbelt. There was no development. So until that broke, really, and it was a pressure cooker. I mean, you were paying £500,000 for a 2-bedroom house on Mill Road, really, and terrace house. It was crazy, wasn't it? And it had to give. Something had to change. So land use got rezoned. Adam Brooks, South Cambridge, the Western expansion. There's so much that's happened to Cambridge since then. But it has led to infilling, and it has led to loss of some of those spaces that you feel made Cambridge quite special. Yeah, the university farm doesn't look like it's probably a farm anymore. No,
absolutely. Okay, so and then I guess as we work our way up your timeline, you then move to London. So
yes,
you've met Glenn.
Yeah, we went down. I got a really good friend. He won't mind me naming him, but Mike Parsons is a really good friend. I met him. He worked at the county council. He's now bursar at Christ College in Cambridge. But we'd just have a little night out. We'd take a few friends. We'd drive down to London, and I met Glenn on one of those nights out. Really, he's a Londoner, South London through and through. His parents, his grandparents, that was his base. Of course, he came up to see me at Cambridge, and I think I was with Mike at, so it could have been a college garden party or something. He was getting the train up to come and see Cambridge, and of course, I think he was quite besotted with Cambridge. Really, he actually bought a suit and a shirt, and I said to him, "Why have you bought a suit and a shirt?" And he was like, "For work tomorrow." And I was like, "I don't know about that," but anyway, he did stay the night. But yeah, I think Cambridge gets under your skin. It does. Yeah. It does. I think, yeah. So I did enjoy my time there, but then met him, and then he was in London, and actually I suppose it was the bright lights of London, really. I don't think, as somebody from Lichfield, I would ever plan to go to London. It was never on my radar particularly.
Sure.
But as a gay man, I think London does offer a bit more. There is a bigger scene. There are more pubs and clubs, or there certainly were then. Sure. And of course, it was just good fun. He had a good, and he still does have a good collection of school friends who are really close, which I find unusual but reassuring. I think there's some comfort in that. But yes, he's got a good collection of friends, and they were around him all the time. So we spent lots of time out and about. And then I then decided to move to London, got a job at Camden Council. Mm-hmm. So I carried on my sort of faceless bureaucrat role and went to work in local government in the capital.
Sure.
But of course, Camden was an exciting... it had a bit of Liverpool going on.
A lot of vibrant.
It had a lot, there's a bit of Cambridge in there. Do you know what I mean? It actually, as a London borough, had an awful lot of interesting parts to it that I thrived on. Hampstead. There was lots to see and do in Camden.
It's really interesting, actually, because as we're chatting now, I've just come back from Vegas, and in Vegas, the old strip is called Fremont Street. I don't know if you'd have heard of Fremont Street, but the old strip, and interestingly, it's much more accessible from a cost perspective compared to the Vegas Strip or Vegas Boulevard, which is the current strip, so to speak. But Fremont Street is kind of where all the different and wonderful elements of Vegas come together, and they've built it with it's got like a roof across the top of it, which is all LED lighting, and they have music come out every hour. They have like a different band play across the roof. And then they've got all different bands set up, and it felt like Camden. It felt really like Camden there, which is which is where the link was. Which is where the link was for me, because the vibrance of it, and just they had all the way down the street, you'd have these circles where you'd have street performers, whatever it was they were going to do, whether it was magic or whether they were wearing costumes or whatever, still life or whatever it might be. You had artists, you had balloon people, all sorts of stuff.
Thanks.
And I was like, yeah, it just really reminded me of the vibrance of Camden.
And
sure.
I think when I was at Camden, we were at the forefront of local government. I think Camden, Westminster, K&C, they were the local boroughs that were leading the way, really. And yes, we had 9/11. We had terrible times when I was working there, but actually, Camden was one of the leaders in local government. And we're talking about local government just at the moment, but it's suffering quite a lot, I think. But it provides such a range of services to people that nobody else provides, that we forget what its role is sometimes. And we've got far away from what it was in the 19th century, but I think for me, Camden still had that edge to it, really, that was exciting. Redevelopment of King's Cross is phenomenal, really. It's a huge piece of urban architecture now, which was just wasteland when I was still there. I mean, you came out the town hall, which is opposite St Pancras. St Pancras was still derelict. The hotel was still derelict. And you'd still get hookers kind of chat you up on the street corner when you came out of the office. It was still there. The 70s was still going on.
How did that go for you?
Didn't see any rent boys.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. So, and at what point did you go, right, stuff this bureaucratic life, I'm going to get involved in the art dealing world? What happened?
I think I'd helped Glenn, as everybody does with their partner or wife or husband or something. You kind of help out, don't you, around the edges of somebody else's life, because you're part of their life, you're part of their world. So people support you in what you're doing. So I'd quite often leave the town hall in Camden and somebody would say to me, what are you doing this weekend? And I'd be like, I'm going to New York. People would be a bit gobsmacked, and I'd be like, yeah, well, I'll get the late flight. I'll arrive for supper in New York. I'll have the weekend because Glenn's doing a show at the Armory or somewhere. And then I'll come back and I'll be back in the office on Monday morning with a Sunday night flight. So quite often the little cheeky trips away like that, which melted people's minds a bit, but were just part of the opportunity was there. And I'd help out and then come back. And then in about 2009, I started working full-time with him and supporting his family and the small team he had at the time running that. I mean, the gallery is one of London's oldest. It's got sort of 276 plus year history, but his grandfather bought it. His father's works in the business. His sister and he work in the business. So very much a family concern, and that very typical of Britain, isn't it, really, that families quite often are the backbone still of what we do in this country, I think.
Family business is the way.
Yeah.
So when you say about going and doing a show in New York or wherever it might be, what does that mean? Do you take the art with you?
Yeah, we pack it up even still today. So we're going out on Sunday to Palm Beach. So we're out in West Palm Beach from Sunday. And there's a Palm Beach show which runs over President's Day weekend, which is sort of Valentine's and onwards in America. Basically, paintings. So it's a traditional art gallery. Everything's got a big gold frame or, quite old pieces. All get packed up in a big wooden crates, shipped out by aeroplane. They arrive, shippers in the US move them around and meet us wherever we're going to be. So whichever convention centre of choice we're at. So although it sounds very glamorous to be in Palm Beach next week, we're mostly in a convention centre.
Yeah.
But, Worth Avenue, the island, the people that are out there, people have several houses in America. We forget the vast wealth in America and also the artistic and interest. America gets a lot of dumbing down, but
sure.
Historically, they're very well educated.
Sure.
They understand art, they understand culture. There's a great swathe of Americans, and admittedly, lots of Americans that can afford that. But, I think I always say if the state has a wobbly edge to the side, it's probably fairly good to go to. If it's got 4 square corners, probably don't go, is my general rule of thumb, really.
Okay.
So yeah, coastal is good. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just more dynamic and more vibrant.
And that makes total sense. So just as I suppose, if it's okay to humour me for a minute, as a person who's interested in business, how does the business of art dealing work? Do you I don't know, in a very basic sense, I think of one of my clients that I work with who sells used cars, for example. He goes to an auction, he finds a car that he can buy for a good value, and he'll bring that back and he'll clean it up and he'll service it and do all the things to it to make sure that it runs well, and then he'll market that on his website, and then hopefully a buyer will come along and pay for it. And is it a similar sort of business, so to speak, in that sense.
It is. I'll get shot if I say that on air, won't I?
Okay,
Probably.
right.
But yeah, it's
sorry.
really,
I don't.
No, it is.
And I suppose that's why I didn't want to just go. Is it like second-hand cars? Because I guess I've explained there's a lot that goes into the background.
Yeah,
of that,
there is.
Right?
And
there's a lot of work.
There's an awful lot. I mean, pieces of art are unique, so they're individual, aren't they? They're all produced separately. They're all very distinct. So there is a lot of research on artists that we sell in the gallery that we like. So very early 20th century artists who are now dead. We collected when they were alive that we still have. So we will find those pictures. So they may come back to us from previous owners. They may come back through the auction route. We may find them elsewhere. So we'll be scouring for those all the time. But again, a bit like your car dealer, you still got to do some work on provenance, on the backstory, on understanding the picture, where it sits within art history, but also then to do some work to it. Lots of pictures need a clean and a varnish. Some of them hold holes in, some need repair. Frames need tidying up, frames need changing. So yes, very similar sort of business. But yes, it's probably a bit more, cars is probably a bit more mass market.
Yeah,
so there's a bit less due diligence, I think, because artwork is quite individual. You've got to be very careful.
Yeah.
People always say about the pictures at home or in the gallery, you're not worried about them really. But it's very hard to take a picture down the pub and flog it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's quite hard to steal something like that because it is very unique.
Okay, so and if I'm okay to sort of so that I understand, because I guess this is new to me, so and I find it fascinating. So there'll be an element of this research, and I suppose there'll be artists that you prefer or that you are looking out for specifically, and then from a regards of how do you market the business? Do you have a website? Do you have listings on the website? Do you go out and advertise because I guess there's an element of wanting to protect the business as well without advertising all the stuff you've got as well. So how does that work?
It's probably surprisingly modern, really, for something that's very old, and given that pictures kind of sit in the antique kind of market. I mean, we do have contemporary artists painting for us today, so there is modern work.
Mm-hmm.
But because it sort of sits within the antique market, doesn't it? And this show we're going to in America next week is a very traditional show. It's jewelry, it's silver, it's all those sorts of things. There used to be a chap that sold armour that we used to go.
Wow,
so we do sit within a furniture, within that sort of aspect of the antiques business within Britain and the world. But yes, I think I don't worry about it. We don't really worry about it particularly. I don't think it stresses us out much. I think we just enjoy it. And we always say to people, you've got to love it yourself.
Sure.
So if somebody's making contact with us, whether it could be existing clients, so a catalogue, they might get printed words sent to them, might be social media, we might end up doing, we do much more Instagram than we used to do.
Well,
we do have a really good website. You can actually do online shopping with it. I mean, not that it happens very often in that business, but you might get an American client who's met us, who's bought a picture, who knows what it
knows, like
feels
knows
like,
and trusts you,
and trusts us, and then might click through and buy. Doesn't happen so often, but we could push that further. We certainly, when we planned the website, when we did it, we planned for that. So we are out there in lots of different ways, but we probably spend a lot of time on a client cuddle, really. I don't know if it's a thing, we call it a client cuddle, but we spend a lot of time with our really good clients. I think, some of them become really good friends. They become part of the brand. They become part of the family. Sure. After lockdown, we brought lots of people up to Molecey who hadn't been away. So lots of these people may have several other really great houses to go to, but couldn't. But all came to Molecey. We had some good weekends at the house, saw some pictures, enjoyed themselves with us, and actually were part of the family. So lots of our clients will probably say it's a family affair, and I think that's what counts for a lot of people.
Got it.
People give to people.
Yeah,
they don't give to things, do they? I think, as we said earlier, that energy that people generate is what you respond to.
Yeah.
So we do lots of different methods to get the artwork to people, and of course we've got people that follow particular artists. So some of them will collect several by the same artist. And Glenn's dad would always say it is about collecting. He would show people in the gallery in London. He would just lie on the carpet and he would show people a new picture that had come in from France or wherever he'd found it, and he'd say, "This is really interesting example by this particular artist," and people would just form a collection. We've got lots of clients that are collected for 70 years. We'd have different pictures by different artists. Today, it's all a bit different as well. People do it for other reasons. They want to fill a space. They want something interesting.
Yeah.
something to match the cushions. But people do interior decorate now.
And do people still do it as from an investment perspective as well? Are they looking to invest, to go, okay, I'm going to store my wealth in this piece of artwork and hopefully over time it will increase in value, for example?
I think most pieces go up in value. We don't make a big thing out of that particularly, but pieces do go up. People can see that. So yes, I mean, some galleries do make that a major part of their business. We've never done that.
Okay.
It's much more
about the
enjoy it.
The enjoyment of the art.
Enjoyment of the piece, really.
Yeah.
But yes, you will see pieces do go up in value because they are individual. So they do create their own value. And again, as a gallery, we've pushed several French artists and their prices have increased because we've created a market for it, really. So yes, within that, you can do some.
Awesome. That. Okay, so, and then I guess that leads me on to asking you about the former HSBC Bank in Stamford, which you've now turned into an art gallery.
Yes.
Tell me about that project.
And we'd always talked about, in London, we'd never actually, Glenn's father had the opportunity probably in the late 80s to buy Queen Victoria Street, but couldn't do it. We'd never bought a gallery in London. It was always out of reach, really, in a sense. And so we were looking around. The whole family, I said about this South London family, really, the whole dynamic shifted. Glenn's sister moved up here with her 3 children. His parents have now moved up here. So the whole family geography has moved to this part of the world, really, following us. I mean, we did it to escape from them, and they've all caught up with us. And
followed you up.
Yeah, follows us up here. Follows up. Well, because, big skies, open countryside, it's lovely. And really receptive, friendly people. I think Glenn's dad would say people are so much friendlier up here than they are in London.
Right.
So actually, it's a really lovely place to be, isn't it? And we don't do enough to say how lovely it is. Perhaps we don't want more people to come, but it is a lovely part of the world. So we'd never bought anything. We never owned a freehold. And we kept having a conversation about if the nieces and nephews took the business on, the biggest cost to any business is its premises, especially for something like this. We spend hundreds of thousands of pounds a year renting businesses. Our place in Knightsbridge. So to buy a freehold in Stamford was pretty unique, really. I mean, if Burley doesn't own it, there's a few families that do. There isn't much property in Stamford that comes on the open market.
Sure.
And of course, HSBC, City and Midland Bank had bought that in 1909. So it had been a bank for 120 plus years. So the opportunity came up. We went to view it with a host of other people, some developers we recognised, some people we didn't know, some people we'd seen before. So it was a whole sort of open day session around the building, and it was horrific. I said, if I go back in there once more, that'll be once too many times. I mean, it was gruesome.
Yeah.
The staff toilets downstairs, unspeakable. The general decline of a building was incredible. Was sad, but not something I wanted to be part of.
Sure.
And we talked about how much was it worth. The agents were putting it on at 700,000 or 800,000, and I was like, 5-story building in the middle of Stamford, it's got to be 1.5 million. But of course, every developer you spoke to said, no, you can't pull the money back. Mm-hmm. But as a family business, you can pull the money back because we weren't really in it for that particularly. But so, yes, we've got a mortgage at the moment, but like everybody, eventually that disappears. And actually to have a place that's home is really important, I think, going forward. So yes, for the future of the business, it made perfect sense. And
it does, yeah, absolutely.
And we had a great team. We had a really good project manager, and he set about pulling the building apart and putting the building back together. And actually, it's phenomenal. I mean, Glenn and his sister and I a little bit, but being quite creative about colour and decoration at Molecey, I think we'd been very strong about that. At Molecey, it definitely feels like somewhere you wouldn't normally experience locally, and I think we tried to reinterpret that in the bank, and I think it's worked well. People love coming in. And people are using it as a destination. When I lived in Cambridge, I'd often be like, friends are coming over to go and do the backs. We'll go around King's College. We'll go and go punting. And now people are using the bank a bit like that. They're like, I'm going to come in the bank next Saturday with my family. So that's nice. If it turns into a little destination and people keep coming in, there's always something different to see. So yeah.
I love that. And is a longer term plan to move out of London completely and only... Am I asking things I shouldn't ask? I don't know. It was just my head is, that's where my head goes.
I think the family have moved out. We've got a freehold up here. It is a city of London business. Its origins are in the square mile. It was rooted in the traditions of the city. put pictures into livery companies, into boardrooms, into furnishing the square mile. When we bought a gallery in Mayfair in 2004, the Patterson bit of the name, that gave us a Mayfair gallery which connected into the auction houses and all the dealers that are in King Street that are all around that part of the world. So it is a London business. It's not a country business. I think we will probably change our premises in London, get something smaller, perhaps in a more exciting bit of town. We've been on Beecham Place now for about 15 years, and it's declined a bit. I think if we're in Pimlico, if we're in somewhere a bit more fun, we could have a smaller headquarters in London, sure. But I don't think, and the girls that live in London that work in the gallery for us, that our directors would probably kill me if I said we wouldn't. And I think next week we're in America and they say, where are you based? And you say London, they understand it. If I say Stamford,
where's that?
They'll say Massachusetts. Oh no, where is it? There's one on the coast in America. They'll think Connecticut or wherever it is. Yeah. So I think a London HQ does give you some strength.
Makes sense.
So we might have something a bit smaller.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, fantastic. And then I suppose we'll move on to Molecey, which we've not spent much time talking about, but is just a place that's really close to my heart. So what was that like when 10 years you've been working on it and still you have workmen in every day, right?
Yeah.
So what's
about 8 people there this morning when I left.
Wow. So, and that's 10 years of work. It's been it's a
labour of love
project.
But something I've enjoyed because it's about what other people get out of it. I think I don't recognise it often enough, but it's what you said earlier. It's that magical moment. It's that just time out, and actually other people get so much sanctuary out of it. We bought half of it 10 years ago this year, so September time 2015. We bought the granary, which had been converted into a house in the mid 1980s. We set about transforming that, but only really we thought about self-catering holidays and bits and pieces. And one of the first families that came to stay had come out of London, and she taught her children to cycle. And she said, I couldn't have done that in London. It was really important. We needed to get it done. They needed to be able to cycle around. And actually, they had the freedom in the garden to be able to cycle about. And she was so pleased to go back to London thinking they knew how to balance on a bike.
Okay.
So everyone took something away. I think one couple got engaged one Christmas on the island and in the garden, and this sort of idea about it being quite romantic kind of started to come home a little bit. And we'd had lots of requests locally for people to be able to do something at the house. So small parties, family dues, that sort of thing. So informally, we got into events. It just happened by accident. It wasn't something we'd planned. We bought a reasonably big house in the country, but we hadn't planned to share it with anybody particularly.
Sure. But you always plan to live, because you live in the Ferrari garage.
Yes.
And is that always the plan? Is that always what you wanted?
Glenn wanted a barn conversion. If we were moving out of London, he wanted a barn conversion. He didn't want a house. He didn't want a house with pantries and back corridors and back stairs. And everything I viewed when I came out of London to look for things was sort of those sorts of quirky Victorian houses, really.
Okay.
So he wanted open plan living, which the Ferrari garage gives us.
Okay.
But then we had to do something with the granary, really.
Sure.
So that's where this holiday idea came from. And then ultimately more events. And then we were in a constant dialogue with Next Door. They kept putting Next Door on the market. So the mill and the mill house itself, another 6.5 acres, that had been variably on the market probably for most of the time we'd had the granary, really. And in 2019, we got it over the line and bought it. So we bought the whole thing. Of course, locally, it's a huge landmark, isn't it? I don't think when we even bought part of it, when we bought the granary, people would stop me and say, or come to the house and they say, you live at the Banana Man's house, don't you? The Banana Man's house. They kept telling this story about the Banana Man. Of course, I had no idea who the Banana Man was.
The Banana Man.
The Banana Man.
Yeah.
So even today, people will say, oh, you live at the Banana Man's house. So, of course, me being a storyteller and having a passion for history, I'd slowly unpicked with others, previous owner Caroline de Brulé, Maggie Ashcroft in our village that runs their West Deeping Heritage Group, people I'd met, interested, exciting people about history, who were telling the story. And, the Banana Man was John Van Geest. So, I know chapter and verse about the Geest family as far as I can tell, really. But as a figurehead in British society and driving the British economy forward from the mid-1950s, a huge enterprise locally, it touched so many people's lives. And I think, again, a dynamic business person, I think he had an opportunity to sign this agreement with the Windward Islands to start banana importing into Britain. And post-war Britain, banana would have been quite exciting fruits. And I think he just stumbled into something or had the opportunity. And, he got money from the royal family, the Dutch royal family, to sort of seek all funding. And it spawned into a horticultural business, into a food processing business, into banana importing. It's hundreds of millions of pounds by the mid-1980s.
It's huge. And do you know, I've just thought of a story which I've not heard. Literally, I've heard it's from my childhood, but I had a history teacher. Interestingly, I had a history teacher called Mr. Bedford, who still teaches in Cambridge now. I think he teaches at Manor now, but obviously he'll be a lot of years older. But I remember him telling me about his mum. So he was Cockney, grew up in East London, big West Ham fan, huge Hammers fan. And I'd always have banter about football because I'm a Manchester United fan. And but nonetheless, he shared a story of his mum having a banana for the first time, and that she just bit into it and was like, "This is disgusting," because she didn't realise you had to peel it.
Really, the skin was disgusting.
It's just really funny how that story with history and my teacher in London and bananas and all sort of leads together.
So 10 years after the Second World War, food was on ration, sweets were still on ration until the coronation. He signs this agreement in 1954 and goes on. Ships are being launched what a week.
Wow.
Geese Bay, Geese Tide, a huge business, really.
And that was him. So
John Van Geese lived in the house.
And he was essentially the banana man.
Yeah, banana man, a bastion of British business, really, a huge part of British society, I think, and well connected. Leonard, his brother, lived in Spalding and was really responsible for the horticultural side of the business. Okay. But people that work at Back-of-Bar today will still call it Geest because actually its origins are still within Geest. And the business got broken up and divided off, and Fife's Bananas bought Geest Bananas. So Geest is better, but you can still sail on a Geest ship.
Really?
So you can still go to the Caribbean on a Geest line ship. So and of course he monopolised the trade. He built the ships. He sent the ships out with people on them to the Caribbean and brought the bananas back. So
amazing.
Yeah, huge. One of the people I'd quite like to meet. People say, "Who would you like to meet?" I'd quite like to meet John. I think he'd be an interesting person.
Is he passed away now?
He died in about 2000. No, a bit earlier than 2005, I think. Really. Okay. So his wife died in 2005. He died about in the 90s. So yes, just more or less after they left the house, I think.
Okay. Well, the story behind that is don't leave the house then.
Don't leave the house. No. I always worry because everyone stays in the house for about 10 years if you look at previous owners. So
your time's coming. I'm assuming your plan is to stay forever, right?
Yeah, I think it is a forever home. I don't think you'd have to actually walk away.
Well, it must be the amount of effort you've gone into, 10 years and you're still going. So how much more of the project is left? Or is it just one of these things that you just keep finding things?
Yeah. We inherited Neil Brown, the owner, from '84, had a helicopter, so he built a hangar in the garden for his helicopter. So we've got a derelict helicopter hangar in the garden. I'd love to do something with that at some stage. There's always something on the horizon.
What about getting a helicopter?
Could be fun. He used to use it for cutting the willow trees. Apparently, he used to come down the mill stream with the blades and trim the willow trees, weeping willows with the helicopter blades. I'm not sure it's particularly safe, but yeah.
I don't think you'd get that signed off.
Not today. But he died recently, very sadly, but he was huge in race car engine development, so in the early 70s and things. So I hadn't realised till Silverstone were doing tributes to this chap. But again, somebody else who'd lived in the house who actually contributed vastly to British motor car racing. And I just thought, actually, I met him once, sadly, but it wasn't long enough to talk to him. But actually, I hadn't appreciated till he went. But actually, he was huge in business. I think there's a lot of people in that house who kind of get a lot of energy out of it.
100%. And I feel like it's, I don't know, hopefully it will have some impact in helping me on my way. So,
yeah, I think it does. I mean, the famous resident in a sense is Bridget Riley, who's still alive. So if you look up Bridget Riley after this, you'd find out she's one of the most important modern British artists of today. But she lived there with her sister in the 1950s and was influenced by the landscape, by the setting, but by the water, really.
Okay.
So the water I alluded to earlier, I think the water is a huge part of what makes it very special. And as a water corn mill, it's had 1,000 years of history, probably. I'm certainly mentioned in the Doomsday Book, but the water's been passing through that building, and I just think that water, that flow, that energy that comes with the water, I think is probably part of what makes the magic.
Yeah, love that. And you can hear the stream, you can hear the water, can't you, all the time,
and it bubbles and it moves, and you can run the wheel. We've got the water wheel turning again, so it hasn't run for a long time, but having the water wheel on, anything like that, opening up sluices. Sally calls them the little slacker, and there was a big slacker. So you open up the slackers, you open up the sluices, you can let the water through, so you flush it around the garden. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. Wow, so what have I not asked you that I should have asked you? And then I've got on my phone, which is in my pocket, I'll get told off for getting my phone out probably. But on my phone, I have 3 questions that I ask all of my guests at the end, which I'll do in a moment. But is there a question that I've not asked that I should have done?
I don't think so. We touched on weddings, didn't we?
We did touch on weddings, yeah. So
weddings
tell me more. Tell me more about the weddings that like you said, Molecey, you've turned into this events venue almost, and I must say it's very unique, particularly in the locality, because when I suppose to do you justice, I was looking to host a relatively exclusive mastermind group, which we've now launched, and we've had a couple of trial events, and they've gone amazingly. And that traditionally those mastermind events, when you look at my competitors in the locality who do those things, they tend to go to maybe there's a pub in Elton, there's a few of the hotels, Marriott and Holiday Inn and stuff, which are just, they're fine if you are organising a 300-person dinner, which you just want chicken and gravy. But there's no real character about them. And I think character is important. We were talking earlier about my wedding. Sadly, we didn't have really any budgets, but we still selected the Bell at Stilton, which is like a traditional historic pub. And obviously, as long ago as we got married, Molecey wouldn't have been doing that. But tell me about it becoming a wedding venue, and tell me about how that works for you.
Yeah, I suppose as I said earlier, it sort of happened a little bit by accident. People kept coming to us saying, "Could we do something? Could we put something on?" And we sort of got into it accidentally a little bit to satisfy a local curiosity or a local interest. And then I soon started to realise that all these people that talked about driving past it for 30 years and the Banana Man's house could come on the other side of the gate and actually make their own memories. So actually it then doesn't become the Banana Man's house, it becomes your house.
Sure.
And so for me, it was very much about people having access to it, to experience it, to take something away positive, but actually to share what is your happiest day and, a really special day for people. When we bought next door the mill and the house itself in 2019, we got our planning permission because, of course, what we'd done from 2017 to 2019 was probably slightly illegal, really. It was a little bit naughty. You could host an event on your land, but the legislation was a bit more geared towards farmers using the odd field. It wasn't necessarily for a private garden. Sure. So in 2019, we formalised all that and we got our planning permission through, and we did all of that officially. So we can host 22 plus events a year. And one of them is the DP's Literary Festival. So we do other things as well as the weddings. But, that's a fantastic opportunity for people to come in and hear authors talk about books. I think for me, art, books, culture, the enriching parts of life, some of the things that are the most important. You've got to spend time on those things. And weddings are part about that. They're about love, aren't they? They're about happiness. They're about people having a good time. So they are lovely. My only drawback, having given up drink probably about 10 years ago and escaping London, is that we've now created London at the top of the garden. So every weekend in May, June, July or August, you go up top of the garden, there's 200 people having a great time.
Do you ever get involved?
I'll go up and say hello. Yeah. People want you to. And also, we've got under their skin and they've got under our skin. We've gone on a holiday with some of our wedding couples. They come back for christenings or birthdays or family dues, and anniversaries. We keep the engagement going as much as possible with them. And I think that's quite special. Lots of wedding venues can't do that. No. I famously was chatting to a good friend and about his wedding venue, and he said, "How many weddings have you got till November?" And I was like, 2 or 3. You've got like 80 or something. Of course, we don't process people in the same way. You arrive on a Wednesday with the marquee company, you've got Thursday, Friday setting up, Saturday the wedding, Sunday something else. People will do a barbecue or have another family. So it becomes a festival rather than a wedding with a wedding in it. So, and I think we've been to lots of weddings where we've travelled quite a long way and then you feel like you turn around and go back again. So actually to spend a few nights away is great. And again, that helps with the local economy. Local businesses benefit out of it from food, drink, whatever it might be, and accommodation. We're always looking for extra rooms.
Yeah.
We've got 16, I think, now at the house, but you can always find a
Oh, I didn't realise there's as many rooms.
You need to do more exploring. You've not been around the house enough, have you?
I've not. No, I only know that there's two or three bedrooms. I don't think I've been to the top floor. I think I've only been up one floor.
Well,
and I think all I remember is really there's a Caribbean room, which is at the top of the stairs, and I think I've seen one other room.
Yeah. And we've themed all that around these people. That's the room that we've themed around the Geese family travelling to the Windward Islands. So there's stories to tell.
Amazing. Right, my phone is actually over there recording us, so I'm going to go and grab it for my 3 questions, and then Harry's going to have to edit us.
So I'll take you out.
Yeah, exactly.
You said it
wasn't recorded. It wasn't recording anyway.
Right. 54, that was.
Yeah, shocking. Right then, so my 3 questions for you. How do you develop yourself?
I think external challenge is what I thrive on. It's other people. So, for example, practically, every wedding comes in with some ideas. They say, could we do something different? Could we do this over here? How about this there? And I think we develop the space around them, a bit like your path. Sure. You've not got a path to the thing. So it's not myself, it's the project. But I think in my personal life, it's the same sort of thing. I think I thrive off other people's energy. I think people say I've got lots of energy, but actually I think I get it in part from other people. Meeting people like yourself, I think we all take a little bit of Pete away, don't we, really? Or whoever it might be we bump into. I think that's so it's other people, I think. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It was you made me laugh my head off. Those of people who are listening or watching the podcast, maybe they've been to a BNI before, but the first time we met at BNI, and your energy is just, it was amazing. You brought a whole different energy to the room, and I thought that was amazing. So my second one for you is, what if someone was watching you and looking for advice on success? What would 3 tips that you'd give someone for success? 3 things that come up for you when you think about success.
I think being honest.
Yeah.
I think it's always good to be honest in anything you do in life, isn't it, really? And be very clear about what you're trying, what you can achieve with people. I think that helps other people to be successful. It helps yourself to be successful. So I think, yes, I think when you see somebody and it's not true, I think that for me is really important. I suppose integrity is tied up a bit in that, really, isn't it? I think some of those old-fashioned values, I think, are really important still for success, isn't it? The gallery thrives on a gentleman's agreement, a bit of a handshake. And you know that I'm a bit of a handshake person. We've agreed we'll do it. We're doing it. I'm not too fussed about the finances. I'm not too fussed about everything else. The mechanics of it all work. But actually, Glenn's father would give people a picture on a Friday night, say, take it home for the weekend. If you love it, come back and we'll talk about how you're going to pay for it.
So I think a whole different way of doing business.
But I think so. I don't know if you call it a gentleman's handshake, but it's a gentleman's agreement, isn't it, in the old-fashioned sense of the word? And I think it's a lovely way to feel about things. Of course, the world's got tighter, hasn't it? You need a contract, you need an invoice, do you know what I mean? Yes, you do need some of those things. I appreciate that, but actually, I enjoy working with you, so that makes me happy. Yeah. So I think that's the second thing. The third thing probably is friendship.
Sure.
I think, you can develop yourself through your network. And BNI was a fascinating example of that, really, wasn't it? I absolutely besotted with it. My life is too irregular to commit somehow, and I haven't carved out time for myself. But friendship, I think, there's a room full of people meet in Peterborough on a Wednesday morning. They meet internationally like this, but as a group of business people, to meet other people and to feel like they're your buddies. Lots of them are good friends, I think, if you're there regularly. And I felt that
it just naturally occurs with people. If you spend that time with people that regularly, it just naturally occurs that relationships blossom because you get to know each other.
And then that develops you. I think friendship helps to develop, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, and just as we speak now, Joanna, who is a member at BNI, has got a 10-year anniversary of her business. She is a mortgage advisor but organises mortgages for people. It's her 10-year anniversary, and she's She's having a gathering today for people, and you go along and support, right? It's lovely.
I think you would. I think it's really important. I asked you about Vegas and High Rocks, isn't it? I think you do something like the London Marathon. You're going to be doing something really important. Whatever people can do as a friend, and it can be with a baby F or a capital F. It doesn't really matter. But I think give you some money or be there on the sidelines or whatever it is. I think, as you say, I think being supportive. I think it's what we can do well as humans. I think it is really important. So friendship, I think, helps develop.
Amazing. No, I love that. And then the final one, and I think this will be interesting from you, is what advice would you give your younger self if you were, with what you know now? What would you advise your younger self back in the day when you were studying law at Cambridge?
I think I'd have been more honest with myself. I think I probably would have come out sooner. I waited till I was 27 really to come out. I think because society was still very different.
Sure.
So although it's sexuality, I think it would have changed me, maybe for the worse, I don't know. But I think just being honest, I think being able to come out earlier would have been good. I mean, I know people today who are sort of 15 and they come out, and there's been a lot of younger people, doesn't know, that whose sexuality is much more expressive. One of my first, I think, with a job in Cambridge, I did introduce myself and was chatting to people. I then must have mentioned being gay, and they were like, yes, it was obvious. But I think actually being honest about who you are as a person is really important. And it might not be your sexuality, it might be anything, but I think that is quite important to say. If you're struggling, if you've got a problem, a disability, anything it could be really. But I think we should all be much more honest about it. And I've learned that now. I'm sort of much more frank about things. I'm much happier to have a conversation about something than I used to be. I think that's important.
Love that. Graham, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
An absolute pleasure.
You've been very kind.
Oh, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I really, really appreciate you taking a bit of extra time to be with me as well. You said that you needed to go about 20 minutes ago. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. And I believe the listeners will have got loads of value from that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. That's super.
Appreciate it. Speak to you soon.